Hello, my name is Leah. A few months ago, I posted a video going over my first month working on Fiverr as a freelance developmental editor. So today, I am back with an update. I've been on Fiverr for 6 months now. Today, I just wanted to go over how the past 6 months have gone for me and kind of just get into some detail and share with you guys what I've been working on, what it looks like financially to work as a freelance developmental editor, at least starting out anyways. I am definitely by no means a good representation of what a freelance developmental editor looks like with, an established client base, consistent work, all of that kind of stuff. This is not my full-time job. It's not my focus at the moment, so I just want to make that clear. This is just something that I started because I knew, number one, I had the skills for it. Number two, I wanted to put those skills to use in helping other people work on their stories. And so far, I have really enjoyed working as a developmental editor. There's been some ups and downs, but I will get into that. I have my laptop here because there's numbers. I can't remember all of these numbers. But in review, I first started my Fiverr account at the very beginning of the year with 5 gigs. 2 of them were for novel editing and 3 were for screenplay editing. I learned very quickly, even at the very beginning, that the screenplay gigs did not do well. There's a more saturated market for that on Fiverr, meaning there's more sellers who are kind of covering that market base, and so as someone new with no reviews, people weren't really coming to me for that need because there were other people with more experience who kind of covered that niche already. That's not to say that saturated markets can't be broken into on freelance sites like Fiverr. It's just that that takes a little bit more work in marketing yourself, and that was not work that I was willing to do for those gigs. The novel editing, on the other hand, definitely was a place where I felt like I was serving a purpose within the niche that people wanted, because I consistently have people booking my gigs, inquiring about prices, all of that stuff. As for my prices, at the beginning, y'all, I was basically giving away my work for free. It was so low. I said in my first video that in the month of January, I made $148 with 64 hours of work, which divides out to me working for basically $2.30 an hour. This obviously is not very sustainable, but I was doing that intentionally at the beginning. I priced myself low because someone who is looking for an editor is a lot more likely to give me a chance when I'm priced at $50 and don't have any reviews versus if I were priced at $500. The beginning stages of this journey is to establish a review base so that I have evidence to point to say, see, I can do this work and I do it well and I'm worth the price that I'm setting myself at. So I collected some reviews in January. I went into more detail about how that month went in my first video, so if you want to check that out, go watch that. But let us just jump right into the month-by-month breakdown of my first 6 months on Fiverr. In February, I raised my prices marginally, and I also shifted into a price per word format instead of a flat rate so that I could give more customizable offers. I technically hadn't closed my screenwriting gigs yet, but I didn't get any orders from them. I did eventually shut them down because, again, no one was ordering, so I just deleted the gigs. So I will be ignoring those throughout, and we'll just be focusing on the 2 novel editing gigs that I had open. One of those was a beta read, more similar to a manuscript evaluation with developmental feedback. It just doesn't include line edits, and then the other being a full developmental edit with line edits in manuscript comments and a full editorial letter. So in February, my beta reading gig was priced at $0.0006 per word, which for reference would be $30 for a 50,000 word novel. So still very cheap. I'm still, trying to collect some reviews in this phase. I had 2 beta reading orders in the month of February, which totaled to $9.60 because both of them were sample edits. That's another thing. If you go onto my gig page, there is a buy now button, but it's for the sample edit, which is for $5 for each gig. That is because that is the lowest Fiverr Fiverr will let me set that price at. The sample gigs are important to give someone an idea of how I edit, just to see if I would be a good fit as an editor for their book. Obviously, I'm not going to expect someone to make a huge investment. They don't even know me or my style, especially when I don't have those reviews to back me up. Both of those were sample edits for beta reading. My developmental editing gig was priced at 0.0015 per word. For our 50,000 word novel, that would be about $75. For this gig, I had 5 orders, 3 of which were sample edits, and then the other 2 were full-length novellas. Between all 5 of those orders, I made $80.80, which brings my total for February to $90.40. I worked 42 hours on these projects, bringing my pay rate to a whopping $2.15 an hour. Those numbers may feel weird considering I upped my prices this month, but the reason for that is that the sample edits being at $5 doesn't actually cover the amount of work that I do for the sample edit. Moving on to March. March is a fun one because I had a fair amount of repeat clients actually this month, and it's also weird because there's a mix of price points in here. So I raised my prices again in March, but I did still honor the quotes that I had given people previously. So someone had contacted me beginning of February. I said, sorry, I'm not free until March, but here's the quote. I still did that gig at that price, even though on my Fiverr page I had raised my prices. Anyone who contacted me after I had raised my prices, I gave them the new price. You understand. My beta reading, I changed to $0.001 per word, which for that 50,000 word novel would be $50. And this is actually the price that I have kept my gigs at since I changed them. I feel like it's a fair rate for what I provide to the buyer, and it also compensates me fairly, so it's a more sustainable pay rate, which you'll see later on. And because I'm still fairly new, this and the developmental editing rate are pretty low for developmental editors, but again, that's just because I am new still and I wouldn't feel comfortable pricing myself any higher than this at the moment until I have more experience under my belt. I know I have the skill set to do the job that I'm doing well, but more experience always makes you better and therefore warrants a higher pay rate. Anyways, for March with my beta reading gig, I had 1 order which actually turned into a partnership with that buyer, and I've edited multiple books from them so far. So for beta reading, I made $64 in March. For developmental editing, my new price became $0.006 per word, which brings our 50,000 word novel to $300. Again, as with my beta reading gig, this is the price that I have kept, and it is still currently the price that I have on my page. So for this gig, I had 6 orders in the month of March. 4 of them were samples, 1 was a short project, and 1 was the first 3 chapters of someone's novel who was also a repeat client. Of those 4 sample edits that I did, 3 of them turned into repeat clients, so although doing a lot of sample edits was a little bit frustrating, it definitely paid off in the end, and you will see that later on. But between those 6 orders that I got for developmental editing, I totaled at $46.40, which brings my total for March to $110.40. I worked 27.75 hours this month, which brought my hourly rate up to $3.98. Now, again, I had raised my prices, and I mentioned that those prices are a lot more fair, but because this month has a mix of old price and new price, that final pay rate still feels super low. But you will see the progression as we move on to the month of May. I am skipping April because I took the month off from my freelance work. As most of you who watch my videos know, I am a writer, and one thing that I have been struggling with throughout the past 6 months is finding that balance between my freelance work and my personal projects. I had fallen very much behind on my personal stuff, and so I decided to take the month of April off so that I could catch up on the writing work that I was doing. But I picked it back up in May, and I had 2 beta reading orders for May, which totaled to $128. I also had 2 developmental edit orders. One of them was a sample and the other was actually paired with a bit of ghostwriting. So for this gig, I made $140.48, which brings my total to $268.48. Since I worked 44.75 hours, it brought my hourly rate to $6 an hour. So as you can see, we're kind of doing a steady climb in terms of total amount of money made and also the pay rate. This month was fully comprised of people who were in that new pay rate that I talked about, so this is a more accurate reflection of what that rate gets me. However, again, the sample edits still really mess up my hourly rate because, again, I'm doing more work for them than I'm getting paid for. Most professional editors, from developmental to line to copy editors to proofreading, most will offer free sample edits. So it's kind of that similar thing. You're doing work without a guarantee that it's actually going to pay off, but that sample edit is how you show a client, hey, I can do this, you can trust me with your work. Because it's difficult to hand off a creative writing project that you've worked on to someone. As a writer myself, I definitely understand that. But moving on to the month we are currently in, June. Actually, when is this video going up? Just kidding, this video goes up on July 1st. I'm filming it in June though. Once again, my rates are the same as they were for March and May. And another thing to note is through the second half of May and through the majority of June, I was focusing on my freelance work full time. So those personal projects I mentioned, they were pushed to the side for momentarily. For my beta reading gig, I had another 2 orders, which totaled in $128 for the month. And then I also had 2 orders for my developmental editing. One of those I actually started at the very end of May because it was a longer project, but I'm including it with June because that's when it wrapped up and that's when the majority of the gig took place. But between those 2 projects, I made $669.60, which brings my total for June to $797.60. And since I worked 80.75 hours, my final rate for the month was $9.88. Okay, final thoughts. So total for the past 6 months working as a freelance developmental editor on Fiverr, I have made $1,414.88. Another thing that month to month I didn't want to go into detail about is tips. This is another thing that varied project to project and is part of what affects that final hourly rate because it really just depends on if the client wants to leave one. I never expect a tip, but obviously that's just kind of like an extra thing if the client is really pleased with my work. I found that most people who I was doing sample edits for didn't tip, which makes sense, but for full projects, people usually did leave something. One other thing I wanted to talk about really briefly is how frustrating Fiverr's software can be. Overall, I've had a decent experience with it, but I mentioned in my last video how Fiverr has a system of leveling. So you start on Fiverr without a level, and then once you reach certain thresholds, you get to gain the title of a level 1 seller. I have met all of the thresholds, and I have been meeting them for the past month now, but as soon as it came time for me to get that level 1 badge, my response rate suddenly went from 100% down to 75%. I respond to every message that I've gotten. I do it quickly. I really don't know where that came from, and it hasn't changed at all in the past few weeks. So it's a little frustrating because I know I could be a level 1 seller, and the reason why that's sort of important is it kind of helps tell buyers, okay, these people are doing well at this job, essentially. So if I was a level 1 seller, people would look at my page with a little bit more trust. They would assume that I probably produce quality work for me to have gained that level, and then that obviously would result in more orders. If I were doing this full time, if I was making a living doing freelance work on Fiverr, I would be livid about the response rate thing, but I don't do that. This is something that I do as a side hustle, and it's something that isn't super vital to me living my life. So I'm in the position where I can just kind of wait until that resolves itself, but that is something that happened to me that is frustrating that I wanted to share just in case any of you are thinking about doing freelance work on Fiverr. Overall, again, I am enjoying the platform, especially as a developmental editor. I've found that it is a really good spot to be, and although it's definitely not a perfect system, it works for what I want it to do. So that is my 6-month update on what I've been working on and how much money I have made on Fiverr as a freelance developmental editor. I hope that this has been insightful to you. I know I always love getting a sneak peek into, the stuff that people are doing and building for themselves. And I find that a lot of the videos on YouTube about freelance work, about side hustles, a lot of it feels like, oh, this is easy money, just join, do a little bit of work, and you'll have like a steady stream of income coming in. That's absolutely not how most legitimate freelance work happens. You kind of have to get the ball rolling a little bit, and then it'll either level out or keep snowballing. I've definitely seen that increase in traffic to my page, in orders that I've gotten, in amount of money that I've made over the past 6-month increase. But starting out, it's not going to be like you can log on and make $2,000 in a month. That's just unrealistic, and I feel like there's like that vibe in hustle culture freelance videos on YouTube. So I just wanted to lay out very bluntly what I was making and the amount of time it actually took me to make that money, just so you have a little bit clearer insight on how this played out for me personally. Let me know in the comments below if you found this entertaining, helpful, anything like that. Depending on how all this freelance work stuff goes for me, I might check in at a later time with another update, so subscribe to stay tuned. But that is all I have for you today, so thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again soon. Bye.